to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The reactions to this past weekend's knockout win, Claressa Shields' knockout win over then WBC heavyweight champion Vanessa Joanisse. Hall of Famer and longtime supporter of women's boxing Lou DiBella said, "The girl who fought Shields was completely ill-equipped to be in the same ring. I mean, no clue how to fight. Kudos for Claressa doing her job and getting her out of there quickly. Gross mismatch nonetheless.
Pay attention.
There's very little talent at women's higher weights." And that's what I've been telling you guys all along. Lou DiBella would know. Lou DiBella's been promoting female boxers for a very, very long time.
He ain't got no axe to grind with Claressa. He's just being honest.
Because what else are you supposed to say? That Vanessa Joanisse is the same caliber of fighter as Chantel Cameron when Katie Taylor fought her? Or that she's the same caliber of fighter as Sarah Mafuda, Erica Cruz, when Amanda Serrano fought them?
She's not. We can see she's not.
Twitter user that goes by the name Carl Brandt said, "This was a huge problem with women's boxing back in their mid-90s boomlet. That's why women's boxing dried up and disappeared for how many years? I saw Chris Bird's sister fight a girl on USA TNF who looked like she'd put on the gloves for the first time that night." To which Lou DiBella responded, "It really isn't a problem now, except over 154 pounds, where the pickings are beyond slim and the talent pool simply doesn't exist."
Ain't that what I've been telling you?
Former fighter turned commentator Sergio Mora said, "I can't recall the last time I've seen a middleweight boxer move up all the way to heavyweight, quote unquote, and still appear to be the bigger fighter."
He's talking about Claressa.
Now, let's get it straight. This past Saturday's fight was not fought at heavyweight. When both Vanessa and Claressa weighed in on Friday, they weighed in just under 175 pounds, making it a light heavyweight contest, not a heavyweight contest.
So then why are they saying it was a heavyweight contest?
To make it seem like a bigger deal than it actually is, that Claressa beat up this girl who was grossly overmatched.
So then she shouldn't have fought her?
I didn't say that. I'm just saying this is not like Usyk moving up and beating Fury. And I'm not going to pretend that it is to spare anybody's feelings. Rick Glacier responded to Sergio by saying, "Sergio, what garbage?" Another Twitter user that goes by the name Peter Curran said, "I didn't think it was possible to have a worse women's boxer than the girl that fought Serrano and got blown out. Shields has proved me wrong, except the girl that Shields fought was supposed to be a champion.
Yeah.
Reigning heavyweight champion."
Vanessa Joanisse became WBC heavyweight champion. The fight before she fought Claressa, she won a vacant title.
That was earlier this year, though anecdotally, you could see that this is not the same caliber of fighter as a Chantel Cameron,
At 140.
a Natasha Jonas, a Michaela Mayer,
At 147.
a Lauren Price. I mean, you can see the disparity in skill in what is supposed to be this WBC heavyweight champion.
Plain as day.
Veteran boxing scribe Dan Raphael said Shields with 3 knockdowns off of right hands in round 2 in an utter wipeout of Joanisse, who was stunningly poor.
You think?
So Shields wins a title in a 4th weight class as she claims both WBC heavyweight and WBO vacant light heavyweight titles.
Are you starting to get the message?
Because of how tepid and shallow the talent pool is up there at light heavyweight or heavyweight in women's boxing, I went with Claressa Shields to win, even though she's supposed to be the one moving up. But it doesn't help the optics of it that Claressa actually looked bigger than Vanessa, that this is no David and Goliath situation.
My reaction.
Claressa Shields fancies herself the greatest woman of all times for campaigning and competing in the weakest divisions in all of women's boxing.
So should she not have fought Vanessa Joanisse?
I didn't say that. Unfortunately for Claressa, she can only fight who is there, but let's not pretend who is there is of the same caliber as the girls you find at the lower weights. We can see that she's not. So if this is supposed to be what makes you the greatest woman of all times, above and beyond everybody else in the sport, I hate to burst your bubble, but that's not a strong enough argument.
There are not enough girls up there to facilitate such an argument.
Many of the ones that aren't very good. Vanessa, God bless her, is a prime example. Sorry to say, but it's the truth. Anybody that keeps up with this sport and isn't agenda-driven, isn't disingenuous, if you're just gonna be honest, anybody and everybody that keeps up with this sport knows that The higher you go, the more shallow the talent pool becomes. There are not that many girls up there, and the ones that are, many of them aren't very good, even when they're quote-unquote WBC heavyweight champions.
Why?
Well, it's because a lot of women just aren't that big.
It's anatomy.
A lot of women don't weigh in that much, and the ones that do, well, they're not boxers.
No.
They're not boxing.
There are only 21 women registered as heavyweights on BoxRec. Only 21 registered as light heavyweights.
21 worldwide.
And of that 21, how many of them are actually good?
Compare that to the 134 registered women in the super lightweight division, a much deeper talent pool with better fighters, much better fighters, and you can see that almost immediately.
So, does Clarissa not deserve any credit for this?
I didn't say that. I actually rate Clarissa Shields. Number 3 pound for pound on the Ring IQ pound for pound list, but I'm not going to pretend that she's fighting the same kind of fighters that Katie Taylor is fighting or Amanda Serrano.
She isn't.
She's a great fighter in not so great weight classes. That's the best way to look at it.
So then what's all the hullabaloo about?
That Clarissa Shields claims she's the greatest woman boxer of all times, and there are some people who want to believe that, want to believe it bad enough that they're going to look at her beating Vanessa Joanisse as some kind of a monumental achievement, when anecdotally,
And on paper.
no matter how you look at it, Vanessa Joanisse is not of the same ilk as the fighters you find at the lower weights. She's not as good as they are. And I'm not going to pretend that she is to keep up appearances for Clarissa's reputation,
Or your agenda.
which we'll discuss even further in another video. Men's lightweight news. Eddie Hearn has reiterated that he would love to sign Shakur Stevenson after holding talks with him, but said he thinks the Gervonta Davis fight could happen next. I wouldn't be surprised to see Tank versus Shakur because situations and circumstances are everything. Tank's got all his eggs in a basket for the Vasyl Lomachenko fight. Then that falls through. You're left holding your dick at that point going, who am I gonna fight? Shakur's a free agent. He's ready to do a deal. Timing is everything.
So a Shakur Stevenson fight, if Gervonta were going to have it, that would presumably go down in the fall or winter months. But Gervonta could just as easily fight the winner of Cruz versus Valenzuela in the fall or winter months.
I think that's a bit of wide-eyed optimism from Eddie Hearn. Not saying that he's a wide-eyed optimist, but I do think it's a bit naive to assume that just because the Vasyl Lomachenko fight fell through, Gervonta will fight Shakur Stevenson next. That's not the only option on the table, or the cheapest one.
Think about it.
So Shakur Stevenson has been making approximately $3 million a fight per fight for a long while now. What would he want for a Gervonta Davis fight? One would assume that he would want more than that, whereas Isaac Cruz, comparatively, he doesn't make what Shakur Stevenson makes.
Because he's an undercard fighter.
For all this talk about Isaac's popularity having grown in the last 2 years since he fought Gervonta, and it has grown.
A little.
It hasn't grown enough that he's headlining his own shows, because he hasn't headlined his own shows. His last fight, his next fight, those are all undercard fights.
Every fight that he's had since he fought Gervonta Davis and lost has been on an undercard. He's not a headliner.
And why is that important?
Because that would make him a cheaper alternative for Gervonta in the fall or the winter. It's a cheaper alternative because Isaac isn't a headliner headlining his own main events like Shakur Stevenson. He doesn't make what Shakur Stevenson makes.
So between Isaac being a cheaper alternative that's easier for Gervonta Davis to a side, and the added benefit of familiarity, the devil that you know, that Gervonta knows he can beat this guy because he beat him before.
I wouldn't be as confident as Eddie Hearn that Shakur Stevenson will face Gervonta next. Gervonta might fight Isaac.
It's not that I'm against him fighting Shakur Stevenson. I would like for him to fight Shakur Stevenson, but I'm not convinced he's going to. Shakur, who said, these YouTubers are the biggest liars. They get paid to make a story that creates the most views. Hopefully y'all are not dumb enough to believe all the lies that they're putting out there. Believe none of what you hear and half of what you see.
Is he right?
Yes, he is. It's my understanding that there are some other content creators that are paid by the fighters and their teams to run their spin on a story, service as another arm of promotion for a fighter or fighters that may fight under a particular banner. And this is not a new practice. This has been around for some years now, that when Shakur Stevenson says that some of these YouTubers are liars and they get paid to come up with the hottest story. That's true in more ways than one.
Remember Glovegate?
After Wilder versus Fury 2, there was never any substance to that story. They took a baseless accusation that Wilder made because he's a sore loser and ran with it. From that, several YouTubers made thousands.
Propping up that conspiracy?
If you were a content creator at or around that time, whether you were propping up that conspiracy or debunking it, there was a lot of ad revenue out there for anybody talking about that. Which facilitates the point that Shakur Stevenson is making. In the effort to generate that ad revenue based on how many viewers they can draw to their channels, you think some of these content creators won't lie, claiming to have the inside scoop that never seems to pan out over time?
By the time everybody realizes it's all bullshit, they've already started up their next narrative.
They already made their money. There is truth to what Shakur Stevenson is saying, though I get the sense he's talking about something specific. Now, what specifically he's talking about, I really don't know.
But here's the gist of it.
I don't get the sense that he's going to sign to Eddie Hearn because Eddie Hearn doesn't have very many options for him at 135. That's the first thing. The second thing is, while Eddie Hearn might believe that Shakur will get the Davis fight, I don't think he'll get the Davis fight.
Sorry, not that optimistic. I'd love to be wrong about this, but I don't think I will be.
And if I am, then great. We get the fight. We get the kind of fight from Gervonta that we've been asking for against the kind of opponent we've been asking for. I don't get the sense that's what's going to happen, and Shakur might end up doing more business with Top Rank if for no other reason than one of his longtime managers, Jay Prince, has done a lot of business with Top Rank for decades.
Not just years, decades.
And this is who is providing counsel to Shakur Stevenson. This is who's managing him. He might funnel him back over to Top Rank on the premise that they're willing to pay him what they've been paying him.
How many people right now are willing to do that? We know he's not going to Golden Boy, that's established. I'm not convinced he's going to Matchroom.
And that leaves only the PBC, but the PBC don't seem to have either the fight dates or the money that he's used to. And finally, the latest from two-division, current reigning WBO super lightweight champion Teofimo Lopez, who says, "It is motivating to go to fancy parties and see the look of faces bothered by my presence, not knowing I worked so much harder to get here than quote-unquote them. So yes, racism still exists. The only difference is that other shapes and colors mask it. Crooked smile earned, not fucked."
This is the second time that Teofimo has alleged he's been discriminated against on the premise of where he's from or what he looks like.
He made some inflammatory comments about Top Rank, saying that they're preferential towards black fighters, where one or two black fighters at Top Rank said the opposite.
Terrence Crawford and Shakur Stevenson.
Do I think that Teofimo's woes and his problems have anything to do with being discriminated against on the premise of his racial or ethnic group? No, I don't.
Nope.
In today's outrage culture, weaponized accusations, like this one, what I've often seen online and here in the YTBC are the inadequacies of the individual disguised behind the collective, hiding behind the group, making it about them when it's really just about you.
Strength in numbers.
In order to elicit an emotional response from the collective on the premise that one of their own is being discriminated against for no other reason that he's part of a group, a specific group. But that doesn't seem to be Teofimo Lopez's problem. From the moment that he beat Vasyl Lomachenko in late 2020, he let it get to his head, and that's when the problems really started to spiral out of control. The wedge between him and Top Rank as his longtime promoter.
How he grossly overestimates his own marquee value.
Eddie Hearn touched on it. He talked about it because he promoted at least one of Teofimo Lopez's shows, Teofimo's fights, the George Kambosos fight in the tri-state area. And Eddie Hearn said it himself. This is a kid who's delusional, who overestimates his marquee value. Now, obviously, Teofimo didn't like that, but that's more about money.
Not where you're from, or what you look like, or who you pray to.
It's not my intention to paint the picture, an image of a perfect world. We are all imperfect people in an imperfect system. This is an imperfect sport with imperfect infrastructure. But the nature of Teofimo's problems...
Do you really think that's what it is? You see him. You see how he carries on.
You heard what he said. Because he felt like Top Rank wasn't giving him enough attention, he took a shot at a completely different group of people, which was unnecessary. They're not the nature of your problem, and they never were. Your problem was you wanted too much money, you wanted big money for what wasn't a big fight, and you lost.
Yeah, you eventually got better money than what Top Rank was offering for the fight at the time, but you lost.
So do you think you can go out there and get your ass kicked by George Kambosos and it's not going to cost you something? That doesn't change things? It's a wonder that they're still promoting you now, because long gone is the Teofimo Lopez we saw at 135. This Teofimo blows hot and cold.
You never know what version is going to show up.
And I don't say it to slight him. I don't say it to spite him that he's not as big a draw as he thinks he is. Because if he were, Top Rank would be more than happy to promote him. They don't benefit from his failures. And the fighters, they don't seem to understand this. But then again,
several of the fighters, they're not the brightest bulbs or the most honest people. Honest with the media, the fans, or honest to themselves.
He says he goes to fancy parties and looks at all the bothered faces that are there. Is the only possible answer for this that you're being discriminated against? That there are people, maybe they don't like you, and maybe they don't want you around.
And the only possible answer to this in your mind is that they're prejudiced.
Well, I hate to break the news to you, Teofimo, but there are people within your own ethnic group that think you're a bozo. They think you're a moron.
I'm one of them.
And it's got nothing to do with what you're talking about, so much as how you carry on, carry yourself, the decisions you've made. You were on the right track, and you blew it.
It's not too late.
But this being pattern behavior, if it's happened before, it will happen again. Case in point, this is not the only time that Teofimo felt he was quote-unquote discriminated against, and for what?
Why?
Because you think Top Rank, a Matchroom, or the powers that be are supposed to break the bank for you when you're not as big a draw as you think you are.
No, that hurts your ego, but it's the truth.
And it's not just the truth for Teofimo. It's the truth for Shakur. It's the truth for some other fighters that are out there, because fighters, in a very general sense, have big egos.
Maybe they have to have big egos to do what they do as professional boxers, to believe in themselves when no one else does.
Maybe, but that doesn't make everything they say the gospel.
The truth.
Just because Teofimo says it doesn't mean I'm going to believe it. I watched you screw the pooch for a year.
Because you're greedy.
How many of these fighters do you think are going to admit to that? That sometimes the fighter's the problem.
How many?
The fighters, their managers, their teams, sometimes they're the nature of the problem. When I look at Teofimo, that's what I see.
I don't believe he was discriminated against. If somebody doesn't like him, it's probably him as an individual, how he carries on and carries himself.
He's not going to admit it.